Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Car Studio. If you are new to this channel and you just found this video because you're trying to figure out how to fix your Mercedes, then consider subscribing because I have a lot of videos like this and more coming on just quick money saving repairs and videos on boats and how to flip cars and some cool car stories. A lot of content on this channel, diversified. So I wasn't planning on making this a video because really I'm just frustrated and wanted to get this thing back on the road. It's late at night, I've got to work early in the morning. But once I got into it, I was like, this is so easy. There's no videos, no write-ups on any of the forums that I know of on how to do this. And I figured, you know, I might as well share my knowledge from my experience with this. So, little backstory. My family was down in Daytona last week, and right before they left, I had just spent like $1,200 on maintenance on this 2013 Mercedes GL550. I put a couple tires on it. These are very bad. I say a couple tires, and people are probably, oh, why don't you change all four of them? So these Mercedes are really bad about wearing out the rear tires. Look it up, it's a common problem. The alignment is in spec. Every time I get tires, I get it aligned. There's nothing wrong with the alignment, they just wear out rear tires. So I put two new rear tires on it, new rear shocks. It has the ADS system. That wasn't cheap. It was very easy to replace them. Also did all new brakes and an oil change. And this has, it just turned over 170,000 miles. It has been super reliable. We've had it about 3 years now. Zero issues to speak of besides general maintenance. So I thought, I was very confident it would have no issue going down there and coming back. But long story short, Saturday, they broke down in Georgia. The battery light came on. Luckily, my fiance was sharp enough. She noticed it, called me, asked what to do. I said, go to the nearest auto parts store, have the alternator checked. If it's not charging, then just get a hotel room. We'll figure out something from there. So she did. It was at 11 volts. I was like, I don't know how it's running right now. Get to the nearest hotel and check in, and you know, I'll come get you or find a shop to repair it, something. No one had the parts in stock. Insurance wasn't trying to tow us more than 15 miles, and she was like 8 hours from home. So I loaded up the truck and trailer, went down there the next or that day and towed it back, and here we are. So it's not the alternator that fails in these cars. It's usually just the voltage regulator that fails, and that's what this little part is right here. So I'm not sure what an alternator costs from Mercedes, but I could bet it's north of $800. From Advance, an alternator for this was only $400 for a reman. However, it is a Mercedes. It made it 170,000 miles on the original alternator and slash voltage regulator. So I thought, if I get another OEM voltage regulator, I'm sure it'll last the life of this car. So that's what I did. And this goes for really BMWs, Mercedes, Volvos. They have an external voltage regulator, unlike most American cars, and it's usually just a couple bolts to replace it, and then it'll be charging again. So it's a Vallejo alternator. This is a Vallejo voltage regulator, and it was only $118 at Mercedes, no special discount or anything. And as you can see, it's literally, I think, 3 bolts. I haven't got far enough to change it yet, but I did get the alternator down, but I did get the alternator to where I can get to this. I didn't pull it completely out of the car, and I got to that point and I said, you know what, I'm going to film this and show people how easy it is to fix this and save them probably $1,000 or more. So this is all the tools that it's taken me to get to this point. Just a couple ratchets. I got a little stubby 3/8 ratchet, a regular 3/8 ratchet, 13 millimeter, 14 millimeter wrench. That's for the belt tensioner. Just a 7 millimeter on a swivel. This is for the hose clamps on the passenger side charge pipe. We have an E10 Torx that's used on a couple little brackets, and an E12 Torx, and there were 2 bolts that held the alternator on. Super easy. I did have to take a pry bar and gently pry on the alternator to get it out of its mount. And then here's an 8 millimeter I used to drop the skid plates. And then, you know, flathead screwdriver for prying, basically. So before you start on this, the first thing you're going to want to do is unhook the positive battery terminal. That is the positive battery terminal. Don't do the negative. With the negative unhooked, these cars have an auxiliary battery under the driver's seat, so there is a possibility that there will still be some power in the system, and if you ground it out on the alternator, you know, you could fry a module or something. So just to be safe, you want to unhook the positive battery terminal. Now on this one, the battery is under the back seat. When she went there to get the alternator charged, the guy at Advance had no clue where it was. Honestly, I wasn't for sure where it was. I thought it was under the wiper cowl, but with some research I found out it's under here. It's really easy to access. Just move your passenger seat forward. I went ahead and lifted it up also. And then there's this black cover that's just a vent for your floor vents. And it's got directions where you like slide it to the left, it unlocks, and then you can slide it out. Super easy. Then there's a 10mm. I've got it on a ratchet with an extension. That's a clean diaper, just ignore that. This is the family vehicle. And then back there, let me see if I can get you. So back there's the positive battery terminal. It's tight in there. I just loosened it, lifted it up, and then put the cap back in between that and the top post of the battery. So now that you have killed the power to the car, I'm just going to walk you through the steps that got me to this point. It really didn't take long, maybe like 30 minutes. Like I said, the dealer said it was about a 2-hour job to replace the alternator, and that's probably the case. However, in 30 minutes, I have accessed the voltage regulator and I'm ready to replace it and put it all back together. So from up here, what I did was pop off your intake right here. It goes right here to your air box. That was super easy. It literally just pops off. And then you have that charge pipe, which goes from here down into your turbo. That's what the 7mm on a swivel was. I loosened those clamps, came right off, super easy. There was also an E10 Torx right here that I loosened because there's a bracket that holds the charge pipe as well as a hose clamp. So make sure you take that off, and then you can take that charge pipe. And that's all I took off up here. Once I got that done, you can see the alternator down there. There were two E12 Torx that hold it on, and they are both facing the front of the vehicle. And if I have time, I'll get a shot after I put it back together. I also forgot to mention how to take the belt loose. So it has a single serpentine belt, and so down there on that nut I've got highlighted, that bolt, that's a 14mm bolt. It works just like any other belt tensioner. You just put the wrench on it, pull it towards you to the left, which is counterclockwise. That will release the serpentine belt, and then from there get underneath and you get your 8mm. I've got mine on a little drill here, or drill. So I've got mine on a little like 1/4" screwdriver type deal. Makes it easier because there's a bunch of 8mm bolts. So there's those. And so what I did was I took the main skid plate off under here. Like I said, it's a bunch of 8mm bolts. And then there's also like another smaller one that covers up the radiator. And then once you get those off, you can see you actually have quite a bit of room down here to change that voltage regulator. Now let me see if I can get some light situated here. Okay, perfect. So, as I showed you before, this is your voltage regulator. It's right on the back of the alternator, and it looks like those are 7 or 8mm bolts. Like I said, I haven't got that far yet, but you just take those off and it slides off the back of the alternator. Put the new one on. The main power cable going to the alternator is this guy right here. It's on this stud, and that is a 13mm, and it is super tight. I was so nervous I was going to break that terminal off. I'm assuming this is the original alternator. I have all the service records for this car, and it's never said anything on them about an alternator replacement. There is also this black cover and it just snaps on, and I did break some pieces of it. So it just slides over these studs and clips in these like one-way clips, as you can see there. That was kind of a pain to get off, but once you get that off, yeah, you just turn the alternator towards you. There's those 3 bolts, 1, 2, and then 3 for the voltage regulator, and then you can change it. So like I said, this probably is a 2-hour job because the alternator's loose. That's half the battle. And then you probably got to remove some of these coolant lines, which I didn't want to get into, to get the alternator up out of there. Possibly even the radiator fans, and that's just more work. I'm gonna get my tools and change that voltage regulator out, get the alternator put back in, and then I will try to get some of the reverse procedure to put everything back together, and then we'll fire this thing up and see if that fixes it. But in my experience, I've owned multiple Mercedes and BMWs. When an alternator fails, change that voltage regulator, you're back on the road for a fraction of the price, and you still have a good original alternator. Alright guys, I want to show you what fails on these. So if you can see in here, I know it's not the best focus right now, but that right there is like basically like a brush. You know, brushes in an electric motor. So that rides on a copper shaft that rotates, and honestly I don't know the electrical aspect of it, but you can tell by looking at it what fails, and so that wears out over time. Excuse me. So that wears out over time, and then the new one here, as you can see, this one is all the way out, and see how it's just barely sticking up. This one is not out, and you can see it's in the same position. So when you install this, you push it in. Lost my light. So when you install this, you push it in and bolt it on, and this right here is just a cap. You pull that out and you'll hear it click, and that's that spring-loaded brush popping out to make contact on that shaft and on the alternator. So it's very important, do not remove this until it's installed in the alternator, because once that pops out, it's almost impossible. I guess my light is dying. I guess it's almost impossible to get that to you know, go inside while you slide that on the shaft. So I'm ready to put the new one on, and I'll come back to you. All right, I went ahead and just brought the camera down here to show you. It is tight area, but I promise this is way better than removing everything you have to get this alternator on your bench. So here is the alternator shaft. You can see it spinning. That brush rides on this shaft right here. It looks like it's copper to me, and that is how that voltage regulator regulates voltage, I guess. So right here are your 3 holes where that goes. I'm going to try and do this and hold the camera at the same time. So it just slides on that shaft. Like I said, it's very tight. You got all these hoses in the way. Okay, it's seated in there. I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple screws on there and make sure. So this kit did come with new bolts. They are 7mm. Put a couple of these on here, just a little bit tight, and then we'll pop that cap off. Because like I said, once you pop that cap off, it's pretty much a one-time installation. Alright, ratchet here. Somewhere. I'm spoiled by a lift. I'm not usually laying underneath a vehicle, but it's isn't too bad. Another thing I want to point out is when you're prying off that plastic dust cover, there are all kinds of these little terminals sticking out, and I did not see those before, and thank God I don't think I hurt any of them, because you can't see them when you're prying that plastic off. Like I said, the plastic just clips in over these studs that are exposed. I think there's 3 of them, and it looks like it'd be very, very easy to damage whatever those things are. I wish I knew more about alternators and how they worked, so I could give you guys the science behind it, but I don't. I can only show you how to replace this. But who cares if I'm saving you a bunch of money, right? Again, I'm doing this with one hand, guys. Like, if I can do this, anybody can. Alright, we got a couple screws in there. Now let's pop this cap off. I'm assuming this is how this works. I've never done it. Let me try a screwdriver. It's tight. Get a smaller screwdriver. Oh. Just be careful what you're prying on. It's not going to do it. There it is. Did you hear that click? A very subtle click. Let's see. There it is. All right. So that is it, and I hope you can see that brush is now making contact with this shaft. So we should be good to go and charging. Alright, I'm going to reinstall this, guys, and I will just explain the reverse procedure. Alright, as soon as I turn the camera off, I screwed up. So this little dust cap that I was talking about, that you're supposed to, well, I thought you were supposed to pull out to release those brushes. In fact, you're supposed to push in to release the brushes, because it is a dust cap. It covers that shaft, keeps dirt and stuff from getting in there. If I would have paid attention on the original one, I would have noticed that it's still there and it's flush mounted. But it's not a big deal, I don't think. So I popped this all the way off. My brushes are seated. So if you see this, it's all open now. There were like two little bridges there, and that's like the caps that held the brushes in. After it was installed, when you push it in, they would click out and this would be locked in. So all I did was I took a razor blade and trimmed those brushes off so I could slide this back in. Because, like, remember, if I were to take those two screws I put in there to hold it, if I would have slid the voltage regulator back out, it's hard to tell what those brushes would do. There's a little spring behind each one. There's actually two brushes in there. There's a little spring behind each one to keep that in contact with that shaft, and they possibly would pop out. Definitely wouldn't be able to get it in there without damaging something. So I just cut those off with a razor blade. I'm going to slide this back on. That big black dust cover will go over and hold all this in place anyway, so no harm done yet. Learn from my mistakes. There's actually instructions. Let me show you these instructions. These are not the best. So they don't give you any words because it's German. I mean, there is some German writing here, but it doesn't tell you anything. So, but if I were to pay attention, I would see that it says to push and it clicks in. I don't know how I missed that. So just remember, after you bolt the new one on, you push that in and you'll hear the clicks of the brushes. Oh well, you can see here better that where I cut those off. It'll still work. Alright guys, I got that little cover that I ended up having to trim to get it back on over the voltage regulator. That actually snapped right back in the way it's supposed to, so thankfully I didn't ruin that. Got the big dust cover back on the alternator, as I mentioned before. Turned the alternator to the orientation where it's supposed to be bolted up. Put my positive battery cable back on, it's a 13mm nut. Plugged in the connector on the back of the alternator, and then I wiggled the alternator back in the bracket. That was kind of tough to do. There's two bolts, like I said, they're E12s that hold the alternator on, I learned the hard way to align the top bolt first, get it started, then get back under the vehicle, install the bottom one, and then tighten it all the way up. Then I went ahead and put on my skid plates and went back up top, tightened down the top motor mount, and tightened up the top motor mount. Came back up here, tightened up the top alternator bolt, installed the serpentine belt. I didn't take it off all the way, so I didn't even have to look at the diagram. I just took it off the minimum pulleys, so self-explanatory, put them back together. I did unplug this vacuum line off the wastegate just so I wouldn't risk tearing it up. Plugged that back in, installed my charge pipe. Again, it's just 2 7mm hose clamps and 1 E10 Torx right there on that bracket. So after that, I hooked up my battery back up, and I left the motor shields off, the covers, just to double check everything. After I was in there around some hoses and stuff, and I was being careful, but just to be safe, I want to leave that off and double check for leaks. I haven't tried starting it up yet, so let's get in here and see what happens. Hopefully it has enough juice to start. It barely started to pull around here. Put it in the garage. Now before, the battery was so dead that the infotainment screen was not coming on, and you know, then after like 20 seconds the battery light would come on. So let's see. Alright, we need a jump start. Just a second. Alright, jump pack is hooked up to the jump start port. Alright, so far so good. That wouldn't even power up before. We have no codes so far. Wow, she put 1,000 miles on it since the oil change. I literally just changed the oil last week. Yeah, so by now it would have said bad battery, that it wasn't charging. So I believe we fixed it, guys. Let me just unhook the battery jump pack just to be sure. Didn't hear it die down or anything. Yep, everything's still on. Alright, sweet. Alright guys, that does it for this episode. Like I said before, this was just a random video. I like sharing knowledge on you know, easy fixes. I saved myself probably $1,200 or more on this job, because they probably wouldn't have changed just the voltage regulator. They would replace the whole alternator. That's $800 plus labor. I'd say they'd charge 2 to 3 hours of labor at $130 an hour is the rate, so $390. So yeah, around 1,200 bucks. Even at an indie shop, you're looking at $400 for just a cheap reman alternator from Advance, plus, you know, another $200–300 in labor. And you know, we did it back to OEM specs with OEM parts. And I did this, I think it ended up taking me an hour and a half. If I had to do it again, I bet I could do it in 45 minutes, knowing the complete process. So if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and hopefully I'll see you guys again.